I'm also very honored to be here. Well, before I can really begin to even respond to this question about organizing, the need to organize, and what's at stake, I would be remiss in this period, in this time that we're in, thinking about human rights and displacement and homelessness, to not mention that we need a ceasefire in Gaza. And and it's still happening, and it's very much something that we all should be conscious of and we should be fighting for, and making sure that all of the people around the world are taken care of in Sudan and in Congo and in the United States. But I'll move on from there and just say, and organizing, it's a very important concept and idea for us to grapple with and to fully understand and to have some shared language about what exactly are we talking about. Organization fundamentally is about transformation. It is about building power. When we lose, and we lose a lot in this country, we're losing today, it's a measure of our power. So it's easy to mobilize 10,000 people into the streets. We had 3,000 people or so outside the Supreme Court at the beginning of the Grants Pass hearing. And this rogue, right-wing, violent, fascist majority on the Supreme Court still made a decision that is anti-life, that is death dealing. And the reason why they're able to do that isn't just because of the way that our state is organized. It's because our communities, our social movements have not amassed enough power to be able to meaningfully respond. So organizing is about how do we do that now and into the long-term future. And to be clear, I think what's at stake, and I think this has already been sort of referenced, is annihilation. The distance between displacement or homelessness and the kind of violence we're experiencing in the United States politically, experientially, corporeally, it's the same ideas, the same ideologies. And I love bringing up bell hooks in the sort of opening here that lead to the violence of police shooting and killing Black and brown poor people, the same kind of violence that leads to widespread gender-based violence. All of the ideas behind those practices and phenomena are the same reasons why we can't respond meaningfully to the climate crisis. It's the same reason why we can't respond meaningfully to the housing and homelessness crisis. So I think that we have to build a big tent, and that's why I'm a working class leader, a socialist, because the working class is a big tent. It includes most of us. And what does it look like for a working class to organize together, to build institutions, to build social movements that last beyond an individual issue-based campaign, beyond an electoral campaign, and into the future that helps us craft the kind of world that we actually want to live in? Because honestly, what's different for us in this period than any other period in human history is that we are the ones that have to literally save all organized human life. And ending homelessness is very much at the center of doing that work. So first of all, that quote is actually from Kwame Ture, who used to be called Stokely Carmichael, Pan-Africanist, who in his final years was working to unify Africa under scientific socialism, and is an incredible leader, organizer, and teacher for so many of us about how to build power and how to build social movements that are genuinely going to transform the conditions that we're experiencing to advance life. Because he'd say all the time that the purpose of life is to advance life. But the reason I always talk about it is because I think that there's been a catastrophe in the United States of sort of like grassroots political movements in the way that we talk about organizing. So folks are like, we gotta mobilize, we gotta mobilize, we gotta mobilize. And absolutely, mobilization is within the toolbox of organizing. But organizing is about not just getting people to come to a thing. I can get 50 people into a room, but how many of those people can actually tell me that we need to end homelessness? Because housing is a human right. I want people to be able to understand that and to say that. And organizing is about helping people come to new degrees of consciousness. It's about helping people understand and locate themselves, their experiences, their issues, their organization, their city, etc., within a bigger story. A story that allows an opening for other people to be a part of our shared story. Because I'm talking about developing and building solidarity. I'm talking about developing and building commitment and to organization, to other people, We need to be accountable to a base. So I work at Vocal New York, a statewide grassroots membership organization building power to end AIDS, homelessness, mass incarceration, the drug war, and to build an economy and democracy that works for all of us. And we organize a homelessness union, and I'm here representing them right now. And we also have a Vocal Texas and a Vocal Kentucky of the same mission. And, you know, folks experiencing homelessness, helping us not just tell their stories to bleed for sympathy in the public so that people can feel bad about homelessness. No, people are telling their stories to establish authority. I'm telling my story about experiencing homelessness so you understand why I know what is the appropriate policy response. And the organizing is about helping that be the reality. What's the political education that needs to take place on an ongoing basis? Where's the worldview offering that needs to take place? Because newsflash, just because you are directly impacted by homelessness, like so many of us have been and will continue to be in this country until we win, does not mean you're not a white supremacist, violent fascist who is not interested in ending homelessness. So we have to do the work of transforming people. If our people are saying things that are anti-human, then we don't just leave them there. We have to create vectors of change, vectors of conversation. And that takes organization because it takes time and expertise. And it won't happen in these flashpoints of outrage when you see 10,000 people come out into the streets because of some horrific thing, which is a good thing, to be clear. As Dr. Cornel West often says, the day that no one shows up, that's a catastrophe. So we're still showing up. There's still a heart in this country to be saved, to be grown. And I think that organizing has a lot to do with that. So, and again, to be clear, I think we all should be members of organizations that are in the fight for the long haul, not just to end homelessness, but to transform society into an egalitarian society that is gender conscious and expansive, class conscious, anti-racist, that is internationally focused, understanding our responsibility as the one sitting at the actual epicenter of empire of the Western Hemisphere right here in DC, which is why I had to mention Gaza. And yeah, so all of these things, I'm just trying to make it clear that when we're responding to homelessness, especially for those of us who are service providers, who are meeting the immediate direct needs of people who are in crisis, if those needs are not met, that they will die. Because remember, the consequence of homelessness is premature death. So the service provision is absolutely imperative because you cannot build a social movement without human beings. And human beings cannot be in a social movement. They cannot wage a social movement if they are all dead. So we got to do both things. We got to hold the complexity. And I think that organizing helps us understand that what's going to be the issue-based campaigns that are going to be the stepping stones to get us towards our big structural transformative experiences, which will require more power, which will also require the kind of leadership that understands that we have to go there, and that it might take 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years, like the Heritage Foundation knew, to undo Roe v. Wade. So what's our 50-year North Star? And I think it has to center ending homelessness as a structural phenomena, as a political phenomenon. We have to have the courage to demand of both of our capitalist parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, that we need to be really asking ourselves about markets. Should market forces be controlling how housing is distributed in the society?
So I want to just amplify one
Important thing to say that, because I think a lot of times, people say words like neoliberalism and it confuses people because it sounds confusing, but essentially the way that I think about it, it's we might have some progressive ideas, like our politicians, we might want to, not see so many people experiencing homelessness, but there's no desire to fundamentally transform our systems. There's no desire to say this system doesn't need to exist and maybe a new one needs to be built. I'm always talking about what are the infrastructures that we need to build. We have so much infrastructure of violence in the society, but we don't have very much infrastructure of care. How are we going to build that? And sometimes that means we need a paradigm shift, means we have to ask ourselves some fundamental questions about the origin of our society. I love that Native folks came up in this conversation earlier. Like, there are fundamental questions at the core of American politics that absolutely have to be grappled with if we are to understand the problem. Because the problem isn't just not having four walls. The problem is, why do people think that it's okay that some people don't have and some people have, as I heard earlier, 17 jets? What's up with that?
So we've
That actually reminds me of a very critical piece. It's brilliant. Is at Vocal New York, we're often talking about, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies when it comes to politicians. Like I was saying this morning, you could be a frothing at the mouth fascist on Monday, and if you transform on Tuesday, on Wednesday we'll be at the press conference together because you're committed to ending homelessness. So what is the work that's going to take over time to get people there? And I think another thing I wanted to make sure I say before our conversation comes to a close is I also came in to talk a lot about institutional organizing. We've been talking primarily about organizing people into organization, organizing people into issue-based campaigns, into social movements. We also should be organizing organizations into the movement. So if you're a service provider and you serve 600 people experiencing homelessness a week, where's your programming to help people develop their civic consciousness? Where's your partnership with grassroots membership organizations to make sure that those people are being connected into spaces to build political power to achieve the kind of structural policy changes that they actually need and that their communities need? Because you can serve people all you can, but if the service provision that they actually need is illegal or unavailable, then what are you going to do? So that requires a structural transformation, a social change. And the last thing I'll say is, every single person, we should not assume apathy. We should assume either people don't understand the scope or the gravity of the problem, or that they are intimidated by the seemingly gargantuan nature of the big problems in our society, that they can't be solved because it's just too much. I think we don't lecture as much. I think we ask questions. And just as an example, if you ask a person, hey, do you know how many people are experiencing homelessness in the United States? And they don't know, or maybe they'll say, I don't know, 600,000 people. And I'm going to say, you know what? That's a lot of people, right? And they're going to say, probably. And I'm going to say, how many of those people experiencing homelessness is okay? And if any answer other than 0 is said, then some work needs to happen with that person. And maybe if you're trying to build power and trying to build an organization and trying to build a political project, maybe that's not the person you talk to come to the meeting.
So just to add on to that, I would say that the people you were just describing